Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for this September edition of What Are You Reading? We are live now. We'll talk for a second so you can find us on the stream and or on our website, depending wherever you're watching this. We have a few different books to talk about today, and we have a few other things coming up. We have some virtual author talks later this month. I'll show some pictures of those books that we're talking about at the end of the show, but you can see all the information there at thegdl.org/events. As always, all our programs are up there. There's the link below us right there. And everything that you see here today, you will be able to find a list of at gdl.org/what are you reading. We have a list there of all these different books we're talking about. So if you want to go back and you want to say, hey, what was that one book? Well, it'll be there. And I'll put up links later so you can order them from our catalog from there as well. All right. With that, we can get started. Sherry, do you want to take the first book recommendation for us?
Sure. The first one I want to talk about is The Last Chance Library by Freya Sampson. It's a debut novel. And as a librarian and someone who loves books, I will read any book about books and libraries. It doesn't really matter the genre. This one's really sweet. It takes place in England, so some of the things about libraries are a little different than what we experience here. But the basic premise is that June Jones is stuck. Her life has been the same since her mom died of cancer. She never got a chance to travel. She lives in the same house surrounded by her mother's possessions and her mother's cat, who doesn't really like her that much. And she works as a library assistant in the library where her mother worked. She's extremely introverted, except when it comes to the library patrons, who she loves fiercely. When the town library is threatened, June finds a new purpose, and she's trying to save her beloved library. And in doing so, she just might gain back the life she hasn't been living. As I said before, it's super sweet. The library patrons are really funny. It's just a great feel-good book.
What is it you think you like about reading about libraries and working in libraries? Is there some special reason there, or just the familiarity?
I think the familiarity. You would think that, I mean, most people probably don't enjoy reading about their job, but there's so many different things about libraries and books that it doesn't matter the genre for me. I'll read fantasy, I'll read historical fiction. If it has to do with books or a library, I'll probably read it.
All right. Okay, Nancy, we have you up next. What do you want to talk about first?
I'm going to talk about The Firekeepers Daughter. It's teen fiction. It's newish. You might have to put a hold on it. It is so good. It's about the Ojibwe tribe in Michigan. So there are comfortable, familiar things to read about. Teen fiction reads really fast for me, especially if it's got a good plot like this one. Unfortunately, they're talking about the drug abuse issues within the tribe and also within Michigan. They're talking about methamphetamines, and someone has been murdered and someone is making meth. And this 18-year-old, Donis Fontaine, is part of the Ojibwe tribe. She's a little bit different because her mom is white and her dad was in the tribe. So she's kind of half in and half out, and they play hockey. Hockey's really big in the town, and that's kind of her saving grace. It gets her a little bit of notice, and it helps her fit in a little bit by being part of the hockey team. And also, her husband's family in the tribe have welcomed her and taught her their customs and their ways. She participates in their powwows and things. So it gives a lot of good information about tribes, which is very interesting in Michigan, especially. Again, it's teen fiction, so it reads quickly. And here's a new book that you can recommend to your teen readers. So I enjoyed it. It's a really super good book. And the mystery keeps you going right up until the last few chapters.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Nancy. Chris, what do you want to talk about first?
I'm going to talk about first today, Do Something for Nothing, Seeing Beneath the Surface of Homelessness Through the Simple Act of a Haircut. It's written by Joshua Combs. He's from England. He would walk to work every day to his salon where he cut hair, and he wanted to do something to help the problem. Not help the problem. He wanted to do something to help the people that he saw living on the streets. And so one day he kind of, walked up to one of the people and just started talking to them to get to know them, and then offered them a haircut because he had his scissors and combs and what have you in his bag. And this act of offering a haircut has really streamlined, I guess. He's traveled all over the world, meeting homeless people and offering them a haircut. So each chapter is a story about a person he has met, and it's kind of broken down into the places that he's traveled. London, I can't remember some of the other places, but all over the world. So each story is written to make you think, and to help dissolve negative stereotypes about people living on the streets. He doesn't spare the hard stuff, but it's not depressing because he manages to write the story, their stories, with kind of a sense of hope. It's really very interesting. Each person's story isn't like a huge chapter; it's a few pages or whatever. It made me want to have follow-up stories on some of them. I do follow Josh and Do Something for Nothing on Instagram, so there's a hashtag for it. I also wasn't sure, about how it would make me feel reading a whole book about homelessness and real people. But again, it made me want to do something for nothing as well. So I do recommend it. I shared it on Facebook once already to a bunch of people. They said they would read it. My daughter, I checked it out and took it home to her on Monday, and I brought it back. Well, that was yesterday. Well, she read it in a day in any case. So anyway, it's a really good book. Thank you. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear Chris.
Yes. We can hear you now.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Kristen, what do you want to talk about first?
Okay. I was going to talk about the Undocumented Americans by Carla Corneo Villavicencio. This is a book about her experience being on DACA, and she is somebody who is an undocumented American, and she wanted to use her own name to write about her experience. And this is right after the election of 2016, and she was already a writer, and she had always been afraid to write about her experiences of being undocumented. And but as she finally kind of realized after the election of 2016 that this was the kind of the story that she wanted to tell. So she wrote down her immigration lawyer's phone number on her hand in Sharpie, and then she embarked on a trip across the country to tell the stories of her fellow undocumented immigrants, and kind of also define her own story in the meantime. So she talks about the activism of dreamers. She also explores the lives of other undocumented Americans. She goes to New York and talks about the undocumented workers who were recruited into the federally funded Ground Zero cleanup after 9/11. She goes to Miami and talks about the botanicas, which offer medicinal herbs and potions to those whose status blocks them from any other healthcare options. She actually goes to Flint and learns of the demands for state ID in order to receive clean water. So this is during the water crisis, like at the beginning of that, when everybody was going to the churches and other places to get water, but you had to provide ID, and if you're undocumented, you don't have proper ID to get that. So she goes to Flint to talk about that. She goes to Connecticut and she talks to a family whose father is in sanctuary. So, and then in this instance, the father is in a church sanctuary because ICE is trying to make him go back to his country, and the only way he can not be forced to go back is by seeking sanctuary in a church. So this book is very intense. It's a very difficult to read at times because you're seeing all of these like very human, very real stories of all these people that are going through really difficult times, and all because they don't have the means to come here in a proper manner. I think it's a really eye-opening book, and I would recommend it to everybody because I think that it kind of it gives you a good idea of what these people go through when they come here, and just to get healthcare, just to live their lives. They go through a lot. So yeah, it's a good book.
I'll read that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that recommendation, Kristen. We'll go back to the top with Sherry. Sherry, what do you want to talk about next?
The next one I want to talk about is Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So I'm a huge fan of authors who can write in different genres and do it well, and she does. She's previously written a fantasy based on Mayan mythology, Gods of Jade and Shadow, which is one of my favorite books, and then a horror kind of Lovecraft type of book set in 1920s Mexico, Mexican Gothic. It was on the bestseller list. This one is noir mystery in Mexico City in 1971, and it's based on historical events. So there's kind of like two storylines going on at the same time. Maite is asked by her neighbor that she doesn't know very well, Leonora, to watch her cat for a few days. But then Leonora disappears, doesn't come back to get the cat. So Maite wants to get paid for watching the cat, so she sets out to find her. But she's not the only one looking for her. And hence the second storyline. So Elvis, not his real name, is a member of the Hawks, which is a Black Ops Army group who's tasked with repressing student demonstrations in Mexico in the 70s. They were actually a real group. He's also looking for Leonora, but for a completely different reason. I enjoyed this look into Mexico's dark past and the way it was woven into the story. It was really entertaining. Have not read any noir that I can remember, but really enjoyed this one.
Do you have examples of other authors you like who kind of dabble in different genres?
I do enjoy Nora Roberts. She kind of dabbles in a few others. I'm trying to think of any more recent ones that I've read.
It is
There's some
interesting when they have
different
completely different genres.
Yeah. And I know her previous ones, which I haven't had a chance to go back to. There's one that's vampires, but I haven't had a chance to read that one yet.
So a lot of diversity there in themes and genre. A big difference between kind of those two types of stories.
And
Awesome.
time periods, because Gods of Jade and Shadow was, I think, like 1940s, maybe.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Sherry. Nancy, let's go to your next recommendation.
All right, I'm going to talk about stupid things I won't do when I get old, a highly judgmental, unapologetically honest accounting of all the things our elders are doing wrong. It's hilarious. It's nonfiction. I think I'm going to read this little synopsis because it's so accurate. I can just picture the son. He's in his 50s and he's critiquing everything his poor 70-year-old father does. Soon after his 50th birthday, Stephen Petro began assembling a list of things I won't do when I get old. Mostly a catalog of all the things he thought his then 70-something-year-old parents were doing wrong. That list, which included, you won't have to shout at me like I'm deaf. Excuse me. And I won't blame the family dog for my incontinence, became the basis of this rousing collection of do's and don'ts, wills and won'ts that is equal parts hilarious, honest, and practical. And it's really easy to read. It's not too thick. And I think we're all going to do these things when we get older. Pretty much.
It sounds like a fun read.
It is. It was.
All right. Chris, what would you like to talk about next?
I'm going to talk about Starvation Lake by Brian Grewley. This was recommended to me by a coworker and had been on my to-be-read list for over 5 years. I selected it for the Fenton Fiction Book Club, and we discussed it on September 7th. It's set in a small town in northern Michigan, and it focuses on a high school travel hockey team. It's a mystery title, so I don't want to give away the secret. It was written in 2009, and it's interesting. It was interesting to me as, since it was written in 2009, one of the topics discussed throughout the book actually is a headline for today. So that made for interesting book talk discussion in our book club. The characters are well developed, and there is a follow-up book. In addition to lots and lots of hockey talk, the main character is a reporter, and so we are involved in his investigative routines. We learn more about what happened when the team lost their championship. We learn more about the whole investigative reporting process. I thought the book was really good for anybody who might like mysteries, anybody who might like hockey, and definitely anybody who likes Michigan.
Why did it take 5 years to finally read it?
I think it goes back to, and I don't know if you remember me saying that I was in this mystery kick this summer. I really probably in the last 5 years have not read any mysteries. Give or take 1 or 2 teen ones here and there. So I think it was just I wasn't interested in reading mysteries.
Was it worth the wait?
I really liked the hockey talk and the Michigan setting. So yeah, it was worth the wait.
All right. Kristen, what's your next book?
My next book is Crying in hmart by Michelle Zauner. So the funny thing about this book is that I was a fan of this band called Japanese Breakfast, and I did not realize that the writer of this book and the lead singer of Japanese Breakfast are actually the same person. So that was actually a fun fact that I didn't know until I was reading the book. But so this book, and actually a side note, this month I actually read more nonfiction than I normally do, but this was a memoir. I actually really liked it. So anyways, Crying in hmart is a memoir about Michelle Zauner. She is a Korean American, and she writes this story about her, basically her mother and her relationship with her mother, and how their relationship kind of revolves around food, specifically Korean food. And it talks about her family, the food, grief, endurance, and how she kind of dealt with that growing up in Eugene, Oregon. And she was like one of the few Asian American kids in her school. She struggled with her mother's like high expectations of her. But then she also talks about how she would go to Seoul, South Korea, and like spend time with her grandparents, or I'm sorry, her grandmother, and like all of her mom's sisters. And like her mom and her would like bond while they were there in South Korea, like over like heaping plates of food at like late at night while they were there. So then as she grew up, her and her mom had like a really conflicting relationship. And then she basically moved to the East Coast for college because she just really needed to get away from her mom. But then as she gets older and like goes farther away, she kind of realizes how like much she took that relationship for granted, kind of a thing. And then she starts a band, and she finds out that her mom is diagnosed with cancer when she's 25. And so the book, a lot of it is about their her and her mom's relationship, and just the food. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about this book. It's just so like real and like really raw too, like just the emotions in it. And I don't know, it's a really good book. And like this is her first book. This is actually an article in, I think it was Vanity Fair or Glamour, I can't remember which magazine, but it was an article first and then it was optioned for a book. So, and it's actually going to be a movie, I think. It's just started on filming, or just started like getting going on that too. So really recommend it if you like memoirs, especially like relationship memoirs and or food memoirs. But yeah. And
Is there
and if you
anything
like,
specific about like memoirs that you enjoy?
I yeah, so basically when I read nonfiction, I kind of seek memoirs out, usually biographies. I think it's just that learning about somebody new and learning about like relationships. I really do like reading about different relationships. So like if I seek out contemporary fiction, I usually like reading like relationship kind of things. Like when we read Tin Man, like I love that book because of the relationships. So yeah, and I also really like reading about food too. I don't know. But yeah, this is a really, really good book. And I think it was on New York Times bestseller list for a while too. So, I mean, not that means anything, but sometimes it does. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Sherry, what is the last book you have on your list today?
The last one I have is Witchhaven by Sasha Payton Smith. It's teen fiction. It's also a debut novel, but again, it doesn't read like one. So Frances, and it's witchy. It's obviously from the title, it's a witchy, kind of spooky, perfect for the fall kind of book. So Frances Halliwell is a teenage seamstress in turn of the century New York. And after her predatory boss is killed at her hand kind of magically, which she doesn't realize she has any magic, she's sent to a witch academy masquerading as a tuberculosis sanitarium. Haxhaven's a sanctuary at first until Frances meets Finn. He's a friend of her brother who turns out to have been murdered. She discovers through him that New York has a dangerous magical underworld, and there's also another kind of academy for boys, and they kind of have a rivalry. Their two headmaster and headmistresses are kind of battling each other. And she and her fellow pupils find out that they're woefully unprepared for what's about to come. it feels like this could be a series. It kind of had an open end to it. I haven't read anything that says it's going to be a series, but it could be. I liked the historical aspect, of course, since I like historical fiction. And I also liked a few things, like they tied in some feminism into it. And they also tied in, there's a student in the school who is Native American and had been in a tribal school when they plucked her out to move her into the academy. And that's been in the news a lot lately. So it was interesting to see that tied in as well.
Can you hear me? It sounds really interesting.
Now we can.
What are you?
It was good.
It was good. All right, and let's finish this part of the program up. We'll go back to Nancy. What do you want to talk about next?
I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. It's fiction, and I think it might still be on the bestseller list. You may have to put a hold on it. But it read like junior or teen fiction, and it was so just endearing. I just loved it. It's written on Earth in the present time, but there are magical children, and there is a department in charge of magical youth. So it's fantasy, but it's written in the real world. Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. He's tasked with determining whether 6 dangerous magical children are likely to bring about the end of the world. He has to go to this house. If you look at the cover, he stays in the guest house behind the house, and there's the house that the children live in with their caregiver. And he gets to know the children, and he loosens up a little bit because he's a by-the-book caseworker. It's so cute, and the little children are creatures. It's kind of like a Miss Peregrine, and one of the children is the Antichrist. He's birthed by the devil, but it's not as scary as it sounds. He's 6 years old, and he's really super cute. And he's learning to work on his what do I want to call them? His impulse control, because he has magic also. It's just really cute. And if you go online, there's some fan art, and they're starting to draw pictures of the children, and just so cute. So it was a really fun read. When I read my historical fiction about World War I and II, I usually have to switch over to something like this or a witchy book just to break up the gloom of the war fiction.
Sure, you talked about this a little while ago, right?
Yeah, it was. I agree with Nancy. It's really endearing and heartfelt, and it had funny moments. It's just kind of a light read.
I didn't know you talked about it, Sherry. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Before you were on the program, I think. So, yeah.
You have a double recommendation there.
Yes.
All right. So here comments. Catherine said that she loves a good book recommendation in the chat. And Amanda Joe says that she got on late and she can't wait to watch the rest of this later. Thanks for joining us, both of you. Who wants to introduce Outlawed? Do you want to talk about that, Chris?
Oh, sure. So Outlawed by Anna North is a fun feminist rendition of a Western. I absolutely love this book. I so hope that this author writes a second story. The main character is, I don't know if it's Ada, also known as Doc. She's, the story starts out, she's a young girl and lots of things happen, and she gets training from her mother to be a midwife because of all the kind of, what are they? I don't know, hysteria of that time period. You know, she becomes an outlaw, and I mean, this is just a book with great characters, super fantastic setting, a little bit of revisionist history. Yeah, I absolutely love this book.
How many of us managed to read it? I started it, but I did not finish it. Kristen read it.
I
What
did.
did you think, Kristen?
I
Read it.
will.
Let's not
I
like
liked it. I liked it. I don't. I think I wanted to like it more than I did. I just find I found some parts a little slow, at times. But I did. Yeah, there's some parts I really liked about it, and I liked the feminist twist to it, and I really liked. I like the characters a lot, and I really liked the outside characters maybe a little bit more than Ada, but I don't know, I just think I don't know, I guess maybe I just wanted a little bit more of them, the characters on the outside, because there's just really some interesting characters, and I felt like maybe if we got a little bit more of that would have been, but then it would have been a way longer book, so. But yeah, and I think it's a really cool take on a Western. And I think if you are unsure about getting into Westerns, that this would be maybe a good start for a Western with a feminist twist. But I would say maybe not all Westerns are like this. But there are some feminist Westerns out there, and I think there's another one, there's a series. And I can't think of the name of it. I think it's by Delia Owens. I could be wrong, but it's really good. I'll think of it and I'll come back. But yeah, it's a definitely it's very interesting.
Any other thoughts from anyone or any comments?
I enjoyed it too, and I will say I'm not a big fan of Westerns. Don't pick them up usually, but I liked this feminist version of it. And I liked the alternative history kind of version of it. So I really liked it. There were a lot of characters to keep track of. So that's just kind of a warning if you have a hard time keeping track of different characters, but I really did like it.
And so Amanda said in chat too, books are works of art. We all have our own unique takes. Is any book really good or bad in those terms? Maybe enjoyable or not, depending on the person. I think that's what's fun about this, is hearing everyone's opinions on different books, and hearing your recommendations and why you like them, because that really helps me pick out what I want to read or what sounds interesting to me. Does anybody want to talk about the book a few minutes before we started, we talked about a book we want to read. We're all going to try to read for next month. Does anybody want to kind of talk about that or introduce that?
I will. We're going to talk about Heartberries by Therese, and her last name escapes me at the moment. Maylott, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. But it is it's an Indigenous memoir. So it's also short. So if anyone wants to read along with us, it won't take very long, I don't think. So I'm kind of interested to read that one and hear what everyone's opinions are next time.
I don't have a picture ready to go, but I have on my phone on Hoopla downloaded. So the audiobook, I'm going to start listening to that today. You can find it on Hoopla.
And it's got a pretty cover too.
And yes, so yeah, read that along with us, and you can be here to talk about it with us next month. And before we go really quick, I'll talk to you about what I'm reading right now. There are 3 books I am starting. My goal is to have them all read in time. We'll see how good I do. But first is, we have a author talk September 23rd with Drew Philp, a $500 house in Detroit. You can get that here from the library. I'm enjoying that so far. I just started it. Then the following week, on September 30th, we have Run Home If You Don't Want to Be Killed. I always feel like I'm threatening someone when I say that name out loud. But that should be interesting as well. And then the details on this, it's going to be virtual. We're still working it out. Nancy will be there with me, I believe, when we talk about
Yes.
the Remnant of Copper Country.
Yes.
With the author, with Mary Doria Russell. So that should be great. I'm so excited for that, Nancy.
Yes.
I got to catch up. I have a little more time on that one, so I haven't started that yet. And
I read that one. It's a good one.
I read that one too, and I will also say what was nice for me having read that one is it takes place in Calumet in the Upper Peninsula, and I had just been there. So reading about it and thinking about that particular town was really interesting for me.
And our library branch has the $500 House in Detroit, and I read that one as well. It's really good.
Yeah. You enjoyed it?
Yes.
All right. Well, with that all being said, thank you so much for watching this, whether you're watching this right now live with us or you are watching later, the recorded version. But thank you so much. We'll see you all next month in October. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Later.
Bye.
Thank you.